Hello guys, once again it's Matt, and today we have another video. Thank you all the members, all the patrons. Make sure to subscribe and let's get into it. So today I wanted to talk about sparrows, guys. Some talks have been happening in the forums and even on my Discord that yes, the Sparrow missile is a little bit limited in the game right now. Of course, you probably already saw. If you didn't see, take a look on my tier list video of the rank 8 missiles, right? The missiles that we have in rank 8 aircraft. And there I talk a little bit about how even an R-24 can be as effective as an AIM-7 right now. It doesn't matter which one, the F or even the M. I mean, they're basically the same in the game, but still, these more modern ones, they have a little bit more range than an R-24 or R-27, but it kind of doesn't matter. The missile is really, really unreliable. And to be fair, this could be a problem in real life as well. It was a missile that sometimes it failed, but we don't have this type of RNG thing in the game. What we do have is the lack of an INS on the missile. This is the first problem that we have in the Sparrow, right? And I wanted to talk about what variant we could have that it's not the MRAM yet, that can be added for some aircraft to actually be a little bit more capable. Because to be honest, man, I really think that the ER is in another level. The R-27 ER is almost like, it's such a good missile that I don't know, I feel like I'm divided, right? At a point I think that it's kind of OP and maybe shouldn't be in the game. At the same time, I still think that it should be, because the R-27R doesn't have the amount of energy that you have in AIM-7. But at the same time as well, the R-27 has way better turning characteristics, and also it has a lot better software and just internal systems than the Sparrow, INS, data link, that sort of thing, which makes it a lot better to fire as well. So I am still divided on that opinion. I don't have a formed opinion if we should get the ER removed or anything like that. But one of the options would be to add a new Sparrow. And we're going to talk about the Sparrow that I'm talking about later. First of all, let's talk about the AIM-7F and M problems, you know? It has two big, like very large problems. The first one is the lack of an INS. The INS is the Inertial Navigation System. It's a system that makes the aircraft have its own way to continue to a flight path, basically. I'm not gonna get too much into it, but normally they just use gyroscopic stabilizations together with computer, with some computing power in processing, obviously, together with the autopilot of the missile to make it continue to a direction, or even just continue to fly in the general area of the target, or even just maintain a flight path until you reacquire the lock or have some form of information to make the missile go to the target. You can see the initial forms of that type of guidance on the R-24. If you lose a lock, the R-24 will try to go to a general direction of the target, but it is not really that great on doing that, because it doesn't have a proper gyroscopic inertial navigation system yet. That was introduced with the R-27 and later the R-27ER, right? But the thing is, without that, the missile self-explodes, or it will lose lock. I don't know if this is a real-life problem that it self-explodes. In DCS and other simulators, normally you just lose the lock and the missile just goes away. You can try to get the lock again. It's difficult. I have to test it out a little bit more to make sure that I don't say something that it's wrong. But in the game, in War Thunder, if you lose the lock, if the missile doesn't have an INS, which is basically all missiles beyond the R-27R and ER and the R-24, the missile will self-explode shortly after. If you get a lock, like really shortly after, like 1 or 2 seconds afterwards, you can still make it work. But in an R-27, R-24, you have a lot more time to reacquire the lock. And even a missile like an R-27ER, you have like 60 seconds or something that you can reacquire the lock. And the missile will just, it's probably not that much, but still, it's like 40 or something. I can't remember the number exactly. But the missile will just go to the general direction of the target, making it not lose energy. It actually is saving energy for when you reacquire the lock and get the missile going for intercepting the target again, right? So it's a really big problem with reliability on hitting targets with the Sparrow. You launch a missile, if you lose the lock, the missile will just self-explode and you lost the missile. While the R-27 or even the R-24, it gives you the option to just try to get the lock again, or maybe try to change the lock for another target, and the missile will go to that target. You will lose energy, but it doesn't self-explode, making it a lot more reliable. Like, you have no idea how much more, how many more kills you can get it with just that. So way more reliable, especially in aircraft like an F-16 that you only have 2 Sparrows. I mean, it makes it a lot of difference. And the second problem that the Sparrow has is the range. This is not a very big problem because most of the players won't be even firing from like above like 20 kilometers, but it is still a problem. It doesn't matter, I already talked about this in other videos, but it really doesn't matter what aircraft you are using. If you are using the AIM-7F or M, then doesn't matter the radar, doesn't matter anything. You are limited to a 40 to 45 kilometer lock. It is like that, even though you will have more aerodynamic range and energy basically to get to further distances than that. You can even like see some stats of going like to 100 kilometers. It just doesn't have the seeker range, or in other words, it doesn't have the amount of sensitivity to the seeker head of the missile to actually see a radio wave bouncing back for longer distances than 40 to 45 kilometers, right? How do the Soviets get around that? Well, they use the INS system together with a data link system. So instead of only using the radio waves bouncing back from the enemy's aircraft with your own aircraft radio waves, right? Instead of only using that, which is the case of these missiles of the Americans, they actually use the INS to just control the aircraft to a general direction, and then the actual missile will receive via data link, via a data information link, the information that the missile needs to actually intercept the target from the mothership aircraft, right? So the mothership that it's actually being able to lock the aircraft. Obviously, the seeker, the radar of a MiG-29, for example, it's a lot better and a lot bigger than even an active radar, obviously. It's a lot better and it has a lot more range than the seeker head of a missile. So you had around 100 kilometers of range with MiG-29's radar. You have around 40 kilometers of seeker head range with the R-27 and the R-27ER. But you get around that range, you can go further because the actual aircraft is actually looking at a target, for example, at 60 kilometers and telling the missile via data link where it kinda needs to go. Until it hits that mark of 40 kilometers, that it actually starts to receive enough radio waves from the bouncing back radio waves from the target to actually calculate and get enough information to actually make the proper interception point and a more precise interception point. The data link plus INS system is not precise enough to be able to just get basically a hit with just that. So you cannot use TWS, for example, to actually, or just a normal lock, but with the seeker head turned it off for some reason or something like that. But it will give you the extra range just for the missile to get into the seeker head range. And that's something that the Sparrow cannot do. So that's the two big problems that the Russians solved, the Soviets solved, and the Americans didn't with the Sparrow. Of course, they had the technology with the AIM-54, for example. It does that. So it is kind of confusing that they didn't use that type of technology on the Sparrows as well until very later. But that's the thing. There is specifically one missile, probably two, but I will talk about one of them, that got at least one of these systems, which is the AIM-7P, okay? The R variant that a lot of people talk about, which had even a dual mode of IR and radar guided guidance. I mean, I will not talk about it because it was cancelled in the late 90s, but the P variant was actually produced in large numbers from 1987, 88 onwards. So it is a missile that it was produced. It has basically the same flight performance as an M, but it has a better seeker and just better software and stuff like that to improve low-level performance of the missile. From now onwards, it's okay, it's just an M, right? But there is an improved M, basically. But there is another thing. The Block 2 version of the SP variant got a rear receiver, allowing the missile to actually have this data link connection with the aircraft to receive mid-course correction, which means that technically it can improve the range of the missile. It's hard to actually confirm this, but it might work from further distances than 40-45 kilometers. That would fix the problem with the range. But still, it doesn't fix the problem with the INS. There are some sources that say that the AIM-7P had an INS system or some sort of system that could just maintain its course while you lose a lock or you're trying to reacquire a lock or something. And it would make it so that the missile would just not self-explode in the game, right? Together with the rear receiver, together with the data link, it would mean that, yes, the ER would have a little bit more energy than the AIM-7P, but at least you would be able to fire from further away, similarly to like 50-60 kilometers, just like you can with the ER. And also, if it has the INS, you could make it a lot more reliable to actually shoot a missile, a Sparrow missile. So you would not just self-explode, you could get the lock again and then fire the missile again. It would be a very, very good addition. If these things are true, as I said, it is hard to find information about these missiles. Shortly afterwards, the MRAM was starting to be, used, and with the MRAM, everything like this was kind of, canceled and stuff, and they started to use just the MRAM eventually, right? But we're not there yet. We're not in the AIM-120 yet, and even in AIM-120 we will have less range than the ER, so we will not fix the problem of the range. And even though yes, it would fix the problem with reliability, it's still, it's a short range missile compared to an R-77's, right? You can get kills from like 70 kilometers or even more with the ER, depending on altitude and stuff. So it's something that the AIM-7 it cannot do right now. So yeah, even if I like this example that shows you how problematic this thing is. Forget about the F-14, but imagine an F-15 being added. A lot of people say that the F-15 is superior and stuff, but it would still be outranged by the smaller Raider MiG-29 in this current situation. It would even with a better Raider, with around 20, even 30%, depending on the version, amount of range more than the MiG-29's Raider, it would still be outranged because you would need to wait until it's like 40 kilometers from the target to actually be able to fire the missile, while the Soviet MiG-29 would already be firing the missile from 60 kilometers, which is the max lock range of the MiG-29. Which means that even, especially with the energy that the ER has, cranking and other stuff that it can be done, while the F-15 would just try to go to the target to get as fast as possible to the 40 kilometer mark to be able to shoot the missile, the MiG-29 would just shoot the missile at 60 and just crank. And with cranking, it already would be a lot easier for the F-15 to lose lock with chaff and stuff. And even there, the AIM-7, the ER would just, for like 1/3 of the way, would be already like going straight ahead to the target, while the F-15 was going to start then cranking. So you can see that even an F-15 would suffer a lot in the hands of a MiG-29 with that. And imagine when we get the Su-27 with the R-77ER, with a radar that can detect at the same range as the F-15. So you can see the problem that we are going to face, right? So the AIM-7P might be the solution to that problem, and it is already kind of a big problem. It's the more people get into the game and top tier, the more people will see that PVR is an actual way to actually deal with targets and a safer way and to win matches and stuff. And the more people that do that, the more we will see the Sparrow lacking, because it lacks a lot compared to the ER. So, I don't know. It's just an idea, not that the US needs, oh my god, they're suffering. They're not. But it would be cool to see that, because it's not a very later missile, right? It's not from 1987, 88. Like, it's not a very advanced missile. It's not that different from the AIM. It would still lack, I think, a lot compared to the ER. But it would help a little bit if at least has the range for future additions like the F-15, and even to be used in the F-14, which has already a longer range radar, but at least the F-14 has the AIM-54, right? The F-15 will only have this, and it will get stomped by the MiG-29 if it doesn't have a better missile. The missile dictates the ability of the aircraft to be competitive. It really does. So, yeah, that would be a very cool addition. But anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this, and I see you guys on the next one. Subscribe, and bye guys.